The pasuk Daber Hashem al Moshe b'midbar Sinai. Hashem spoke to Moshe in the Sinai desert. So the Medrash explains Ad shelo hukam Mishkan. Before the Mishkan was erected, Diber imo basner. We find he spoke to him at the burning bush. That's the first time he spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem called him from the midst of the bush. He was a Midjan for many years. He spoke to Midjan. It's interesting. The Torah says Moshe Rabbeinu was shepherding the flocks of his father in the desert. And then he saw something unusual. He saw the burning bush. The bush was burning and was not consumed. The bush was also in Midian. It was in the desert. Right? That's when he had the dialogue. The 7-day dialogue was at the bush. But the Midrash says he first spoke to him at the bush, and then afterwards he spoke to Midian. When he told him, now it's time to go. Now, the question is, they're pointing out all the times, it's the bush, Midian. I mean, seemingly it's really it's the same event. Soon afterwards, he told him to go. Initially, he didn't want to go to be the Redeemer. Then he goes back. He asks permission from his father-in-law, and then he goes. So for some reason, we're identifying that's the second time he spoke to him. Evidently, it's another level of speaking. Evidently, this has to do with, which relates to Klal Yisrael. Then, when he finally comes to Egypt, Moshe, as the Goel, what follows? He speaks to him in Sinai. Shneimar, v'yidaber Hashem Moshe b'midbar Sinai. So he spoke to him in the Sinai desert. Kevan shukama Mishkan, once the Mishkan was erected, Omer Yofihi had tznius. Tznius, modesty, things to be concealed, are something which is very appropriate. You don't do things in public if you do it in private. Yof had tznius. Until now, relatively speaking, it was not within a protected area. Midbar Sinai, although there's no one there. But now that the Mishkan is erected, and the Mishkan is that location which it's reserved only for certain people to enter there, Hashem says, Yof hatzneus shenemar, v'hatznei lech simel ukecho. Apostle Micha, when we go with Hashem, it should always be with modesty. Tznius. So from then, all the communications were all moed with the Mishkan. We find that there's another medrash that says that what's the reason why the Klal Yisrael, we fell victim to the Chente Egel? Because Sinai was a public event. It was a public event. And because it was a public event, Nosnu Umas Olam Ayin Rabbi Yisrael, the nations of the world, they gave the Klal Yisrael an Ayin Hara, an evil. They gave us the evil eye, and because they gave us the evil eye, therefore we were susceptible to this challenge. We were vulnerable. It was a challenge. We had Bechira, of course, we had choice. But if they would have been unaware what was going on, we wouldn't have been confronted with that challenge. It's only because it was a public event. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, initially, the first interaction for Klal Yisrael was public. It was in the world's eye. Now we do it privately. So the Medrash says, so why initially was it a public event? What's an analogous to? You have a young girl, and the young girl father's a king. And the young girl doesn't realize that it's inappropriate for the father not to show his affection publicly before commoners. He shows his affection for his daughter, but since his daughter doesn't understand that, so his daughter could actually be hurt by this. She believes that her father doesn't love her. So whether the king walks with her in the market, in public view or in private, he always shows that affection for her and the love for her. Once she becomes an adult and she understands that it's inappropriate because he already has established his relation with her as a child, says from now on, when we meet, we'll meet in private quarters. Goes in private quarters, I will show you that special relationship, but no longer public view, because it's not appropriate that the world should see what they're not worthy of seeing. So therefore, that's the reason why initially Kabbalistic Torah was done in public view. For us, otherwise we wouldn't have understood it. I mean, if Hashem really is taking us to be his nation, and he really has that love for us, we didn't have the capacity to appreciate what that meant. Therefore, God went public on it. But once he went public, and he established, and he said, you are my Goy Kodesh, my holy people, you're my princely, kingly nation. Once that was done, so already Hashem he stated his relationship. He established it, what it is. Now we fail, now he takes us back. When we come back, it's not because we're no longer worthy. Because now you understand what it's all about. Now it's news. It's inappropriate because the world is not worthy to see who I am. Therefore, from now on, it's mitzvos, it's concealed, and it's only in the Mishkan itself. Okay? And that's why the Luchos Shneos, Moshe prayed, he went to heaven 3 times, he went to Shamayim. Finally, on Yom Kippur, he comes down with the second set of Luchos. It's not a public event. The world is not quaking, and the world is not being whatever, but it's very interesting. Just thought of this moment. I once asked the question, Bilam, it says, Lokom Navi B'Yisrael Kamosha. There's no prophet as great as Moshe B'Yisrael. But the inference is, the connotation, but among the nations of the world, there was a Navi as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. Who was that? That was Bilam. Bilam was the equivalent of Moshe versus the nations of the world. He was the prophet of the world. So why did Hashem give them this prophet? Because the Umasol, the nations will say, you know why the Jews were so special? Because they had that person representing them who had that special connection. You never gave us a person to have the access to God. That's what they're special or not. Hashem says, you know, I'll give you someone. And we'll see what you do with him. That's why Bilam, within a certain context, had a dimension of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the question is, if he would have given him somebody who was the equivalent of our own, holy, and we understand, he gave him a man he advised Paro to bring about the final solution, the bondage. He's a man who committed bestiality. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says he was a person who could not be sated physically. He had an evil eye. You couldn't pick a worse candidate for this. I mean, how is this a response? The Jews are special because he gave him Moshe. You give us that person who has that connection. Maybe we'll be different. He never gave us a chance. The Gemara says, at the time of Kabbalistic Torah, the world was quaking. And all the nations of the world come running to Bilam because he was their prophet. And they say to Bilam, what's going on? It seems to be Hashem is destroying the world. So Bilam says, not possible. Because Hashem had made a covenant with existence that he will never bring a flood upon the world to destroy it. So they say to Bilam, the covenant was not to bring water upon the world to destroy it, to bring a flood, but maybe he's destroying the world with fire. So he says to them, you fools, don't you realize Hashem owes Lamo Yitain? At this moment, God is giving his power to the Jewish people. And he descended from heaven, and that's why the world is quaking. So they responded, Hashem Yivorach Samav Shalom. Let Hashem bless his people with peace. So the question is, I mean, after realizing what's going on, what God is, what should have they said at this moment? So what did they say? Oh, they said, now that we feel secure, we're safe, we're going back to idolatry. We're going back to abomination. We're going back to bestiality. We're going back to incest. We're going back to adultery. We're going back to the worst. I mean, after being aware of what's going on, they should have embraced it. They should have gotten onto the bandwagon. Why didn't they? Because that was their choice. That was the value of Bilam. Bilam may have been a bad guy, but he gave you the information. You should have used that information and taken the right road, not the wrong road. Despite being aware of that, they went left, not forward, not right. Hashem says, I gave you the chance. You have no excuses any longer. Well, as evil as Bilam was, but sharing this information, only he knew it. Because he was the prophet, the equivalent of Moshe Rabbeinu. So he had his value. And you missed the opportunity. Therefore, you're going to be condemned. But good. Bilam was aware of that. What did Bilam represent? He personified the evil eye. He was the evil eye. So when he shared with the people, with the nation of the world, that was within the context of who he was. Therefore, the public event that took place, Hashem made it public, as I said, because we don't understand what the relationship is. So Hashem had to show us, let the world know. But the world knowing now, but who understands what's going on? Only Bilam, because he is that prophet. So he has that direct connection, and he shares it. In what context does he share it? It's coded with that evil eye. As a result of that, because it was a public event, that's why the nation of the world gave us the evil eye. And that's why ultimately we failed with the eagle. Because evil eye brings about prosecution. It makes the challenge much more difficult. If you're under the radar, the record, the challenge is not as much. I'll give you an example. We find by the Akedah, and Rashi cites two interpretations after certain events. So what's after events? One interpretation Rashi cites over the Midrash. Satan comes to Avram Avinu, comes to Hashem, says, Avram, he's such a special person. He does this, he does that. Let's see, will he bring his son as a sacrifice? Yeah. Satan says, I don't think Avram has yet proven himself. The only way he'll prove himself if he meets the challenge of bringing his son. So Satan is saying he's not worthy of that special distinction because. So what activated that new challenge, which was the Akedah that was Satan? So here also, who precipitated? Who was the initiative? The challenge of the ego? Why were we confronted? Ayin Hora. Ayin Hora, that was Bilam. He's the one who created it. Hashem says, the Luchas Rishonos were broken because Ayin Hora, because it was public. We no longer public. When you deal with God, keep it under the radar. The Sefer Shesh Avodah, which I mentioned many times, is a work. It's based on the Zohar. It's all the understanding of Tefillah, the weekday Tefillah, Shabbos Tefillah, Yom Tefillah, Yom Noraim. It's all based on Kabbalistic interpretations. What it is. So there he writes, and Rav Kalatsky discusses it also a little bit. If you do a mitzvah, and you do the mitzvah with the right intent, selflessly, and then afterwards you share it with someone else, that you did a mitzvah. And when you share with someone else, you ingratiate yourself with the mitzvah. You're not sharing because you want to encourage somebody to do more of the same. To give that person understanding how valuable it is, because you want to ingratiate yourself. When you do that, even though the mitzvah was done perfectly, you take the mitzvah down. The mitzvah no longer has the same value. You've deflated that mitzvah. At Satan, we all have egos. So even when you do something perfect and we think we're there, we're about to be pushed off the cliff by Satan. You know something? Once you share it. But when you share, why are you sharing it? If you're sharing L'Shem Shamayim because you want other people to do more of the same, that's fine. That only enhances the mitzvah. But if you share it because you want to ingratiate yourself, which is gaiva, which is arrogance, not because of its innate value, that diminishes the mitzvah. That's always that way. He's always looking out for us to undermine us, to topple us. Therefore, if it's under the radar, is a word. Yom Kippur is the Yom Kippur, the day of atonement, forgiveness. And on the day of Yom Kippur, what do? We have Chamesh Shinuyim. We have 5 areas of deprivation. We don't eat, we don't drink, we don't cohabit, we don't bathe, we don't anoint ourselves. These are the areas of deprivation in Yom Kippur. So the Gemara tells us in Chagiga that Klal Yisrael are Doma L'Malochim. Is one day a year we function like angels. Angels don't eat and drink. We don't eat and drink. Angels don't cohabit. No kinds of appropriations. We don't cohabit. Angels don't anoint themselves. Don't bathe. We don't. Angels speak Lashon HaKodesh, speak Hebrew, the holy tongue. We speak. So there's commonality between ourselves and what? And angels. What is this all about? As a human being, there's no one who's more self-invested in himself than a human being. That's what it is. No one loves anybody more than he loves himself. So if a person has a desire to eat, drink, cohabit, anoint yourself, wash, bathe, it's a negation. Who am I? I'm nothing. You're under the radar. You know, you arrive at a restaurant, you slip the maitre d' $1,000, puts you gives you the best table, best service. You miss out, everybody's looking. Who's this guy just walking into the restaurant? Guy walks in, he looks like a delivery guy with a bike, not even an electric bike, you know? One of these, it's a 3-wheeler, not even a 2-wheeler. And he says, it looks like he's come to pick up something to deliver something. They don't even look at him. Yom Kippur, Hashem says, I don't want Satan even to look at you. You don't even behave like human beings. You have no interest in yourselves. The moment you say, who am I? I am. Because I am. Son says, you see, who is he? Let's check him out. Who is he? We want to stay under the radar. Therefore, tznius, to do, when you do for Hashem, we want to keep it under the radar. Do with modesty. And therefore, the lucha shnios, therefore, when Hashem speaks to us, to Moshe, it's only from Old Moed. Even the Jews were not aware. We're not privy to that conversation between Hashem and Moshe. It's only he gave it over afterwards. That was a student, closest Talmud of Rav Kalatsky Levinstein, Mir Mashgiach from Europe, and of Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, Charan Baruch was also before. I used to say, we used to learn Chumash once a week. He used to speak. Every day there was a shir for an hour, 45 minutes, advanced in Gemara, commentaries, everything. Friday, the last half an hour of the shir, he dedicated to the parsha. Speak about the parsha. So he said, people say that if we would have the Chofetz Chaim in our generation, we'd all be better Jews. The generation would look different. So he says, he disagrees. He says, there's no question. Those who are good would be better. But those who are not good, they would not be better. He says, what's the proof? Yishmael was the son of Avraham Avinu. Yishmael was brought up in the home of Avraham Avinu. Could have he had a better environment. Could have he had a better role model. But Yishmael was what? Look what he was. He was a highwayman. He was a murderer. What happened? Your father's Avraham. The environment is Avraham. How do you turn out this way? So the answer is the good would be better, but those who are not good, they wouldn't be better. They follow they march to their own too. I'm saying the same thing. The nations of the world, it's not because you didn't have the prophet, because you don't have the information. Here's the information. What are you doing with the information? As long as we're not being touched negatively, we toot our own horns. We march our own drum. And they went the opposite direction. Therefore, they have no claim any longer. If we would have had. At the time that we're going to come, Hashem is ready to distribute reward to whoever is worthy of reward. And each nation comes and says, we contributed to Torah. And Hashem shows every one of them. It had nothing to do with their contribution. And they all did it for themselves, had nothing. So they said, all of a sudden they have a new angle. New angle. What's the angle? It's not fair. Why isn't it fair? Because the Jews, they accepted the Torah because you put a mountain over their heads. So they didn't have much of a choice. You should have put us in a position where we wouldn't have had a choice. Meaning, when we wanted to escape, you should have locked the door, not let us out. That's what they're going to say. They haven't said it yet, but they're going to say it at the end of time. So Hashem says to them, I want to ask you a question. I give you 7 no-height laws to behave like civilized human beings. You don't keep the 7 no-height laws. You expect to keep the 613 mitzvahs. Who are you fooling? That's the first thing. Right between the eyes, Hashem says to them. So they're stunned. So they come back with a new angle. And who says the Jews kept the 613? Who said? You're going to tell me, could a father testify on behalf of a son? You're not qualified to testify. Hear this. So Hashem answers them. Let heaven and earth testify. Well, heaven and earth, you understand, it's all contingent on the Jews. They also have a conflict of interest. As a result of that, they're not qualified to testify. And they keep coming back with different approaches, and Hashem shuts them down, every one of them. But Hashem sees, no matter what he tells them, they're not satisfied. If a person is not satisfied, you have to finally bring him to his own realization that he has no relevance. Hashem says, you know something? I gave you every answer why you're not qualified to have any relevance to reward, and you have no relevance to Torah. But I'm going to give you one easy mitzvah. Sukkah. It's not costly. It's easy to do. Let's see how you do it. And that's going to be the litmus test. Since it's all the goyim, they go and they build the sukkah. This hasn't happened yet. No? Home Depot's going to make a fortune. The stocks can go through the roof. They're all going to buy the material to build the sukkah. And what does Hashem do? Takes the sun out of its sheath. It's scorching hot. And after they build the sukkah, the goyim, they come running out of the sukkah. It's like a hot box. So therefore, that proves that they're not worthy. They have no relevance. And Mar asks, it's nice to them in the sukkah. I mean, if a Jew's in the sukkah and it's painful,
but they kick it.
Suffering, yeah, you're supposed to leave the sukkah. So what are they doing wrong? So Gemara says, because when they're going to leave the sukkah,
kick it.
They're going to kick the sukkah. They, with disgust. God, what did you want from us? You wasted our time. The Jew, when he leaves the sukkah, he doesn't leave the sukkah by bolting and kicking it with disgust. So that's going to be the proof that they have no relevance to God and to the Torah itself. That's the end of the day. So what was that location of modesty? Private was the old Moed. David Omar, David says in Tehillim, the honor of the princess is Pnima, is a concealment. Even greater value than inlaid diamonds. Now who's Bas Melech? Who's the Bas Melech? Bas Melech is at Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu is referred to as Bas Melech. Shenemar Vatviel Bas Paro. After Yocheved nursed him, she brought him back to Bas Paro, and he became her adopted son. He became the prince. Uchsiv. The Sikarti is Mitzrayim Biat Adonim Kosher. Makos. And I sealed Mitzrayim with masters which were tough. Makos. Shabo al Mitzrayim. Umelech Oz Yibshobam. And the king that's fierce, he will dominate them. Who's the Melech? Who's Oz? Az Kanomer, Ze Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu is Melech Az. Why is he called Melech Az? Shoyim Malko Shel Torah Shnikra Oz. He was the king, he was the dominated Torah, and the Torah is called Oz. Shnema Hashem Oz Lamo Yitem. Leficha Kavut Bas Melech Penimo. So Moshe Rabbeinu, where did the communication come from? It was communicated through the Moed in concealment. Kokvuda Bas Melech. Who's the Bas Melech? Moshe Rabbeinu. And he was Melech Az. He's the king who represented Oz, the power of Torah. Gemara tells us in Shabbos, Man Malki Rabbanot. Who are the kings? The Chachomim, they're the kings. They're the Melech. What is a Melech? A Melech is the one who dominates, who dictates, and makes things happen. The Chachamim, they are the Torah leaders. The world rises and falls through their leadership. You follow them, the world rises. You turn your back on them, the world actually descends, is diminished. Moshe Rabbeinu was the first Melech Az, because he represented the Oz, Hashem Oz Lameditein. Okay. If you have a gold vessel and it becomes damaged, what do? You go to a goldsmith to repair the gold vessel because it's very valuable. You don't have it smelted down and buy a new vessel. In the Beis HaMikdash, if you had a vessel that was damaged and had to be repaired, there's no such thing. You repair the vessel. It was replaced with a new vessel. Why? Because ein aniyus b'mokum ashiros. You don't display impoverishment in the context of wealth. Lahavdil elef Abdolos, Bezos. Because of who he is and what he thinks he is, he replaces everything. Money means nothing to him. That he goes and would have something repaired. His car has a fender bender. The car cost $1 million. He says, get me another car. Take that car, junk it. It's not appropriate, man, of your dimension of wealth. Lahavdil elef Abdolos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is God's palace. There's no such thing that you repair something. There's no repairs. Anything less than the ultimate, a king, doesn't replace things. He has them replaced. That's the Kovod Hashem. Ein aniyus b'mokum ashiros. You don't display aniyus, impoverishment, with the ultimate level of wealth. So the Gemara tells us, and it's a Medrash also, it's more Sukkah, it's a Medrash here in the Parsha, that if the nations of the world would understand the value of the Beis HaMikdash, for them, that they're beneficiaries, because the Jews being esteemed and revered, being at that special level, and if they appreciate the world advances, they would have encircled the Beis HaMikdash with legions of soldiers to protect it. It should not be destroyed. Not only did they not do that, they destroyed it themselves. So they self-victimized themselves by destroying the Beis HaMikdash. So did they have an appreciation of what it was? If they would appreciate what the payoff is. What the cause of it, of course, they have no realm to even to appreciate what that is. That's the spirituality of the Jewish people. They have no understanding what that is. But with the way it was built, the specification with material, all that, that's Hashem's blueprint. That's the way he wants it. Because only that level of representation activates the various forces which have to be activated to bring about whatever's meant to happen in this existence. Okay, a little further. I'm skipping a little bit to the Pasuk Yudches. So we have all the Jews are being counted. They're being identified from the age of 20 and above. The whole congregation assembled. They assembled them on the first of the second month. And they all were identified according to their paternal line. The Mitzvah Shemos, the number of names. So before we do Rashi over there, it's an interesting Seforno. The Seforno says, once the Yisrael Mishposam, they show you minyonim zek they sheyetzu l'tzuvat melchama. What is the whole idea? What do we have to count from 20? It says 20 because when are you conscripted? At the age of 20. Hoisa akavona lishma yachsham. It was very important to protect their pedigree. The pedigree is essential when you go to war. Why? Because when you go to war, you need tremendous merit. When you're in war, it's a time of danger, and every level of prosecution is in effect. So you need schus avosam, you need the schus of the avos to protect you, to merit that. When do you have the schus of the avos? If you identify, if your pedigree is untainted. What about God forbid your pedigree is not where it should be? his illegitimacy, or other issues of pedigree, you can't draw from Schus Avosam, because you don't identify with them. For Omru, in Bodkin, Echod, Achar, Echod, Mishikosi, Bastruchi Shalmelech. Anybody who's conscripted into David's army, he didn't have to be checked out to be a legitimate Jew. Was to be qualified to be enlisted in his army, you had to have that special pedigree. David would not consider anybody else, because David understood where does the power lie? It's Schus Avosam. And you only have the merit of Avosam if you have that pedigree. Quotes in the Gemara Kedushin, the Shechina dwells only among the families that are of that special pedigree. Why? Because it's widely special, not because of themselves, because of who they represent. Because they're connected to what? To that special pedigree of those special people. So the concept of Yishaldu Am Shpachosam, that's the way this one. He explains, Rashi, cites Chazal, Heviu Sifra Yehuseim. They brought their documents of pedigree, Ve'edei Cheskes Leidosam, to attest to their birth, Kol Echad Ve'echad Yisachas HaShevet, that each person identifies with his tribe. Because each tribe has its own special, unique characteristic. Whether it's Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, whatever tribe you come from. That was the value of this counting. I'd mentioned on this pasuk there's a Yalkut, which is different than the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos says Hashem offered the Torah to the nation of the world before He offered it to us. They each one rejected for his own reason. The Midrash, the Yalkut says on this pasuk that after He gave the Torah to us, the nations of the world came and said, "Why don't you offer it to us? Are you paying favorites? Do you have a double standard?" So Hashem says, "Could you bring me your documents of pedigree that you were legitimate? All of you are issues of incest, adultery, and therefore you don't qualify to receive my Torah, to have the relationship. My children, every one of them is legitimate. He identifies with his parentage, with the paternal line. Therefore, you're not fit, they are. That's why I didn't even offer it. You have to have minimally 150 IQ to enter into a certain level of education. These people have 30 IQs. Could they come with a claim? Why don't you offer it to us? You can't even read. You're totally illiterate. Maybe you're taught to read. What's your level of comprehension? You have no relevance to the whole discussion. That's what Hashem said to the nations of the world. I asked the question. I think it's a phenomenal question. Birchas Torah would say, Hashem chose us from all the nations, and He gave us His Torah. What's the obvious question? Can I ask you a question? I offer multiple people a certain deal, and everyone turns down the deal. And it was a very good deal, but each one for his own reason turned down. And he has no one to offer the deal to. He finally goes to Mr. Joe Schmo. He says, "I got a deal." The guy grabs it. You're going to tell me the reason why that person got the deal because the one who was offering it chose that person? Nobody was interested in taking it. The only taker was this one guy, this one person. Hashem offers the Torah to all the nations of the world. Everyone turns it down. Who offers it to us? Nasim and Yishma. He chose us from all the nations. He chose us. The Torah had to be delivered. Somebody had to accept it. He had nobody to give it to. So He offered it to us. In what way is it indicated that He chose us to be His people? He chose us from all the nations to receive His Torah. I think this is an obvious question. I said something, but not relating to answer this question. I said, during Kriyas Yam Suf, we merited to see something that even Yecheskel Hanavi did not see. What was that? What do we say? It says, Masharosa Shivchal Yecheskel. So, yes, most people, they can't answer you. But it's something we say every night in Birchas Kriyashma. What did the Jews say at Kriyas Yam Suf? They saw Malchuscha. The splitting of the sea, the miracles showed God's God's glory, his majesty. Yechezkel never saw God's majesty. Whatever majesty is, Yechezkel never saw it. The lowly maidservant on the sea saw his majesty. When you see God's majesty and you offer the Torah, you ask the question, what's it all about? The nations of the world who were never privy to God's majesty, he never showed it to them, but he showed it to us. Because he wanted that when he offers it to us, we should say, we have to accept it unequivocal. We don't even ask what it's about. That's the indication he chose us. Because if he wanted the others, he would have showed them the majesty also. So that he showed the majesty, which is the prerequisite for the Nasiv Nishma, that's a Shabbat Chavan. Because if you remember, we spoke, only 20% of the Jews left Egypt. Because they had the trust. We had no provision going to the desert. That means 80% died because they weren't willing to leave. That's a hefty percentage of Jews dying in Egypt. Hashem should have made it easy for them. Well, they should have all been alerted and they would have had provisions. The answer is you have to be worthy of seeing Hashem's majesty. What gave them worthiness to see Hashem's majesty? Because you had that faith, you had that trust. 80% didn't have that trust, they're not worthy of seeing it. And seeing God's majesty is a prerequisite for Nasiv and Nishma. Otherwise, it's not I chose you. It had to be indicated because you have that degree of dimension of trust, therefore you're worthy. And what's the proof you're worthy? You saw my majesty. Because you saw my majesty, you didn't even ask the question, you embraced it and you accepted it unequivocally.
Just to ask the question.